I'd like to start by telling a story. This story is about a Japanese scholar of Tibetan Buddhism whose name was Tokan Tada. In the early 1950s, he was here in California as a visiting scholar at places like Stanford, as well as the American Academy for Asian Studies in San Francisco. But he spent the bulk of 1953 here at the Berkeley Buddhist Temple working on a translation project. This project was detailed or reported on in a magazine called the Berkeley Busse. The Busse was produced by the Temple's Young Buddhist Association. It had a pretty long print run from the late 1930s through the 1950s, with a break during the war years. There's a one-page report about Lama Tada, this is how they referred to him, Lama Tada, and his work at the Berkeley Temple in 1953. According to this report, he spent nearly every week coming to the temple and presenting these Tibetan texts and having them translated with Reverend Kanmo Imamura, his wife Jane Imamura, and a family friend named Hitoshi Tsufura. The texts that he was translating were the Srimala Devi Sutra and the Vimalakirti Sutra. These are interesting choices for a couple of reasons, but for right now, I'll just say that these are two texts that were among a few texts that were given by Korean Buddhist missionaries to Japan 1,000 years ago, and given to Prince Shotoku. Shotoku then used these texts as a way of promoting Buddhism within Japan. So as the story goes, the foursome, Tokan Tada, the Imamuras, Hitoshi Tsufura, they spent, every week laboring over these translations. And you can imagine this sort of small, probably stuffy room where Lama Tada has these Tibetan manuscripts sort of spread out on a low table in front of him, and he's reading the Tibetan, translating it into Japanese. Reverend Imamura is then translating the Japanese into English, and Jane and Hitoshi are busy, writing down what he's saying. According to the report, sometimes they would get through several pages of the manuscript. Sometimes they would get through just a single, one single line, as Tada and Imamura would go back and forth on the meaning of different terms and different words, and what's the right word, and how do we translate it, and what does this mean? So at the end of the report, it says that after working on these translations for over a year, they finally completed them. They finally completed them at midnight on some random day in November of 1953. And as a result, after they did this, the report says that for the first time, the teachings of the Mahayana tradition were fully explained here in America. And so then the foursome celebrated with pie a la mode, which is a lovely little little detail.